Hello and welcome to Dialogue. In 1979, China and the U.S. signed the China-U.S. Science and Technology Cooperation Agreement, an important document which has paved the way for cooperation in science and technology between the two countries. It has been renewed every 5 years since. But this August, it is due to expire again. And with U.S. antagonism toward China at an all-time high during a heated election year, it's uncertain whether the STA will be renewed again. What have the two countries gained from 45 years of science cooperation? Why is there opposition now? And how can China and the U.S. strike the right balance between openness in science while also safeguarding national security? Join us for our discussion today from Beijing. I'm Xu Qianduo. Joining me today are Max Wolff, professor at New School University and CEO of Systematic Ventures, Professor John Gong, vice president at the University of International Business and Economics, Israel, Zhou Yuan, assistant director of the China Institute for Engineering Development Strategies at Tsinghua University, and Carl Fey, professor of strategy at BI Norwegian Business School. Welcome to the show. Well, Max, I will start with you. Please explain to us, what kind of document this science pact is, why it is so important. It involves the police, basically, from professors and researchers from both sides in the two countries, asking the government basically to extend and renew the cooperation document.
Yeah, so the STA and science agreements are very important, in part because despite what the public sometimes thinks, great progress, great breakthroughs are almost never made alone. So scientists need to work together, and the problems we're trying to tackle and the advances we're trying to make are not unique. So there aren't a series of challenges to health, to efficiency, to energy that afflict only Israel or only China or only the United States or only France or Germany. These are shared problems. Scientists come from and train all over the world, and patents and technologies to help further breakthroughs also reside and are specialized all over the world. And so given the challenges of the moment, particularly things like climate change and pandemic, the ability of scientists to work together is crucial. So let me give you some examples. The testing that we got for COVID, the response that we got for COVID, vaccine development for COVID, just in the immediate, was an international cooperation effort, or it would not have succeeded, right? At least not as quickly. And that was thousands and thousands of lives potentially on the line. Likewise, with all kinds of breakthroughs in sustainable energy, we've seen scientists from the United States and China in active collaboration move forward. If you look at solar panel design, if you look at wind turbine design, if you look at the batteries, which are a major focus of the future, especially with electronic vehicles and charging infrastructure, those need to be collaborative. If they're less collaborative, we get less far, more slowly, with more suffering. So it is an urgent need of the people of the world and of delivering a better future that people work together, whatever the momentary difficulties of politics or governments one country to another. This science isn't intrinsically political, and working together scientifically for the last 5 decades, we have not seen any erosion or meaningful threat emerge to either Chinese or American sovereignty and national independence. So while we could imagine all kinds of things, we have done this successfully for 5 decades, and the human race is better off for it. So it's actually quite urgent that the political expedience of the moment and scoring points against each other in an election process doesn't override the scientific advance of the human race.
Well, John, already there are 2 successive 6-month extensions. Let's say the pact should have been renewed a year ago, but no, it's not the case. Why the delay now?
I think this is all very political. I think, this is coming from the political pressure in Congress, in consideration of the perceived benefits mostly accruing to the Chinese side. And people, some people in Washington think that, China's science and technological achievement in the last few decades is somehow, partially attributed to this. This might be true or not, but I think as my previous speaker just alluded to, I think the nature of cooperation between the two sides is mostly, I think, in academic area. It's really in science, and science knows no national boundary. But nevertheless, I think politicians in Washington don't see it that way. They see it, it's mostly benefiting China unilaterally. I think that's where they're coming from.
Well, Carl, what we have been seeing is that the attitudes from the U.S. side is a bit vague. For example, spokesperson from the State Department saying that both sides are, quote, actively negotiating, but did not disclose any progress. How much do we know about what they are talking about here? Extension or renewal, or maybe some changes to that pact?
Yeah, so I have to say, unfortunately, I'm really not sure, and I don't think anyone really knows if this is going to be signed or not. But I hope that the U.S. government is going to decide to want to move forward with this. The Chinese government has clearly indicated they would like to move forward with this. And it's important to understand that this is a framework agreement. This provides a foundation to do other things. It doesn't require that the U.S. and China do anything. It doesn't require that the U.S. government fund certain projects. It's a framework, and then it's different appendices and different other projects that actually get done. So actually, in reality, the risk of signing this, if there is a risk, it is very low. But the problem, as has been alluded to before, is that there is a political climate now in the U.S. thinking that maybe collaboration with China is risky. I want to leave you with one thought here, and that is, imagine that you think it's risky to collaborate with people from other countries. And so your show would say, okay, we're not going to invite any foreign guests on the show. Well, by inviting foreign guests on the show, whether you think our views are right or wrong, Chinese people learn something about foreign views and foreign people. And the foreigners interacting with you and other Chinese people learn about China. So, even if we're not all happy with each other's countries, surely we learn more through interaction, and we have a better chance of changing and influencing the other country through interaction than through isolation. We have to sign this. We have to continue with interaction.
Mm-hmm. Well, Professor Zhou, for one thing, I think it is, pretty sure a consensus. Yes, the Chinese side has benefited from such a pact, from cooperation with their American colleagues and peers, obviously. But at the same time, we have seen China has now become a technological powerhouse with huge progress too. So what's the Chinese attitudes now in terms of renewing the pact?
I think according to existing national policy frameworks, China has always maintained a proactive and open attitude towards international science and technology cooperation, and also a lot of policy instruments to help this collaboration. Back in 2021, the 14th five-year plan emphasized that we would promote the openness and the cooperation in the field of science and technology, and more actively integrate ourselves into the global innovation network. So China would step up the opening up of the national science and technology programs, launch a group of major science and technology cooperation projects, explore and establish a global research fund, and also implement scientist exchange programs. 2 years later, in 2022, the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China also proposed that we will expand science and technology exchanges and cooperation with other countries, cultivating an internationalized environment for science and technology development, and create an open and globally competitive innovation ecosystem. And also recently, the third plenary session of the 20th Century Central Committee of China also further clarified that we would expand international science and technology exchange and cooperation. So I think overall, we can see that China, the policy-wise, have maintained an open attitude towards the science and technology collaborations for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, Max, if you look at the U.S. side, according to reports, there are, say, whatever you call it, accusations or concerns, national security, espionage, say, IPR issues or potential military use of sensitive technologies. I mean, of course, national security is an issue for every country, but at the same time, is it also kind of like a result of securitizing everything, like trade, like person-to-person exchanges, engagement even can be seen as a danger. Is there anything we can do, maybe, to increase sort of like trust, to reduce this kind of concern?
Yeah, so look, I'm a big fan of the following, which has worked well and has been the parent of our better policy in this area, which is to let the scientific collaborators make the more of the decisions and less the politicians. Because if you're in this field and you're collaborating actively with your colleagues and making progress, you understand what the decision is about. If you are thousands of miles away physically and intellectually from these things, sitting in Congress, then all the thing you're thinking about is whether someone is going to run a campaign ad that makes you look bad. And I understand that's your fear, but that has nothing to do with the advancement of science and doesn't really belong as a loud voice at this table. And last thing I would mention, for those less familiar, if you are the product of a graduate program in a hard science field, as myself, I am actually, in the United States, the majority of students that you go to school with are not American. So if we're not collaborating, that means our international student body, 70+% non-US, isn't working with people in other countries, even though they are people from other countries. So, I mean, it's sort of absurd if you are familiar with a lot of what we're talking about, which is if you go to any tier 1 hard science program in the United States, you will see a truly global gathering of young student talent from all over the world, which has been a strength of the United States and continues to be one. So if they're not collaborating, then our international students aren't collaborating with other international people because it's a security risk. It is somewhat absurd as a premise.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the Congress people, do you think they are fully aware of that? There's I would say pretty much talk about that. The U.S., for example, some of the schools relies on the overseas students to a certain degree, not only in economic reasons, but also, the U.S., I would say, respects and cherish this openness traditionally. But do you think the Congress people fully aware of that need to cooperate, aware of the, engagement with other people from other parts of the world?
Look, it's hard for me to speak to all the different, 435 people in Congress. It's a diverse group, but I would say the following: having been being a university professor, we've seen a real hostility toward the open visas that we need for our faculty and our students over the last many years, but it became fairly acute, after 2016, 2017. And it's actually hurt American universities, because here's the thing you don't think about. If a country cuts itself off from the community of scholarship in science, that country always suffers and declines. Right. And when my colleague mentioned how at the highest levels of policy in China, there was a decision to engage to accelerate scientific progress, I think the record is actually pretty clear that countries, including China, who have engaged more in the global scientific community, have also seen their awarded patents and their development of new technologies accelerate successfully. So separate and apart from these kind of imaginary concerns, which have a real base, but are imaginary concerns about national security, the national security of countries tends to be elevated by scientific dominance, which is consistent with international cooperation. So I think we're getting half the national security argument too, because if our technology is better, I assume in most cases, so is our national security.
Mm-hmm. So John, obviously, there's cooperation among researchers from different countries. There's also competition, but the issue is like whether there's a national borderline in terms of competition or cooperation. People often say science has no national borders. it runs across national borders. It requires collaboration. It requires cooperation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think from a researcher's perspective, individual researcher's perspective, there's no such thing as this is a national market, Chinese market for doing research. I think it's all global. I think Chinese researchers, just as they're like the American counterparts, they publish in global journals, in global leading journals. There's not so much of a difference here, in my view. Nevertheless, I think there's indeed not so much of a conflict, but a difference here between personal interest versus national interest, particularly from a security perspective, I guess. Sometimes the states do want to restrict the level of exposure of information in these scientific journal papers. I think there's a balance that has to be made to make sure that for certain fields, I think it's only for very limited fields. I'm guessing mostly in physics and chemistry. I guess there's indeed a perspective from the state that certain things they don't want to disclose, and that's pretty sure. So it's a trade-off issue here that has to be balanced well.
Mm-hmm. So Max, can we say, based on what John has said, can we say, the sensitive part of this cooperation, that's manageable in a way? If it is military related, if it is sensitive, of course, every government, they can do something to say this is protected or this is sensitive part. That's fine. I mean, leave the rest of the research alone.
Yeah, I mean, the STA accounts for that in its original formulation, and there has not been an issue. So again, it's not a theoretical debate. We have approaching 5 decades of experience here, and lots of things are carved out. Lots of things are protected. Both sides have dual use technologies that are highly sensitive. Both sides have interests in batteries and interested in conductivity and interest in all kinds of wireless communications that they consider risky and don't share. And the agreement as it stands, as it would be extended, is fully compatible with, understands, and acknowledges that there are areas that collaboration is restricted for national security reasons. That's not in any way contravened by this agreement.
Mm-hmm. Well, Carl, you are the business expert. You have this business practices. The practice in the U.S., in Norway, European countries, in China too. You are a frequent visitor to China. So tell us, how do you think people can benefit from exchanges, can benefit from engaging with each other in that respect? Probably both sides can improve upon what they have learned from each other.
Absolutely. Collaboration helps a lot. Research shows that when people from different countries collaborate together, they're more creative and innovative. This is a good thing. It's true, it's harder. We have some language challenges. Maybe we misunderstand each other sometime, but the output is more innovative, and that's what we all want. So that makes sense. Let me give you a concrete example of this. As you know, some of my research is focusing on what management practices help companies to be innovative. And one of the big challenges you have when thinking about management practices that drive innovation is you have a lot of tensions that have to be resolved. On the one hand, you need to focus on what customer has as suggestions. On the other hand, you need to develop technologies that can maybe match those. Sometimes there's a balance between this. There are other tensions too, like needing to have, formalization and also some flexibility. Well, since I was spending quite a bit of time in China and working with Chinese colleagues, I came across the idea of paradoxical thinking, this yin-yang approach that we know about in Chinese philosophy. Well, sitting in Norway or in the United States, where I'm originally from, I never would have thought about yin-yang as something important for driving innovation. This is not only important, my research shows, that is approaching both ends of attention, for companies to be innovative in China. It's also important for companies to be innovative in the United States, in Norway, and in other places. So this is an example of where just because we're in a certain location with people with a certain cultural background, we're more likely to see certain things, but the application of these is often very important in other places as well.
Well, Max, this year, an open letter in February, earlier this year, actually jointly written by over 1,000 researchers, including Nobel laureates, secured the current 6-month buffer period for the survival of the STA. So can we see there's basically a consensus, on the science community, either in the U.S. or China, obviously probably around the world, that we need to further or to continue the cooperation among scientists, among researchers, for the benefits of everybody here?
Yeah, so this sort of reminds me of the climate change type debates. There's a very small number of voices that take one position, and then the vast and overwhelming majority of scientific expertise suggests openness. So this is not a kind of confusing situation where half the people think one thing and half the people think the other. This is one of these rare moments where scientists, I think as a group, we're famous for our inability to agree on things, which can be good. They mostly all agree on this, right? So as a community, the scientific and innovation community mostly agrees on this. And I would say one other thing, when you talk about the American scientific community, you are talking about one of the most international populations imaginable, where again, north of 3 out of 4 of the people in the scientific elite in the United States are not American. So this is already an international community, right? So you're now saying, hey, should we shut off this international community from other international communities for reasons that aren't 100% clear or not? Again, because nothing in the STA says that you can't shield dual use technologies, you can't kind of take some things out of broad collaboration because they're too sensitive, either in the Chinese side or the American side. There's lots of latitude for national security considerations and for areas to be less collaborative. So this is not a mandate that you require open sharing of things that are sensitive on either side. It's an invitation and acceleration of collaboration when, where, and how it's comfortable. Each government and each group of people are free to make their own determination. The STA does not take agency from the scientists or the governments involved. It's pretty clearly delineated not to do that.
Well, Max, of course, when it comes to some areas like the fight against climate change and also the governance of artificial intelligence, people would say it's more urgent actually for the two countries, U.S. and China, to work together, of course, including their science community for technologies or new technologies to help to solve this problem, the challenges there. I mean, it is for the benefits not only for the two countries, it's basically for the entire world.
Yeah. Look, the United States and China have global technology leadership, one or both, in many areas. This is correct. But they both now play to a global audience. So billions of people are using the technologies developed in the United States and China, and billions of people are waiting for innovations and improvements, right? So I picked the global pandemic and I picked the climate change challenge because I think there is no boundary to those impacts, right? So if there's a global health pandemic, it doesn't respect our artificial political boundaries. It just is an organism that attacks other organisms and isn't interested in our politics or our feuds or our squabbles. It's not how it works. Likewise, if there's particulate in the atmosphere that's causing rapid and unstable changes and developments in the technology, then we're all climate affected. And again, our political boundaries are not terribly meaningful to carbon monoxides or heat traps or climate change or rising sea levels. Our challenges don't respect these artificial boundaries. So chaining our scientists' ability to work together to solve a common problem is counterproductive in most cases.
Professor Zhou Yuan, recently there's a commentary article published in Nature magazine. Professor Yasheng Huang pointed out that the U.S.-China relations are too important to be left for politicians. Basically, he talked about, in the event of the absence of extension or renewal of the pact, basically. He suggested researchers, scientists from both sides, China and the U.S., to propose new ideas, specific plans to continue to work together. I mean, what's your take on that?
the scientists should establish a regular academic dialogue mechanism. So this can be achieved by, for example, like hosting the academic seminars, international conferences, providing the personal exchanges in the international scholarship to better collaborate on research. And also, we believe that for some of the technological sectors, the firms may also form the collaborations in the forms of joint ventures, or for example, like through merger and acquisitions, supporting the collaborations in the areas of R&D or market expansion, etc., etc. We believe that, and also for the industrial collaboration, it is also very important for China and the U.S. to collaborate to strengthen the so-called supply chain. As we understand that we have this so-called supply chain resilience concern, but if we actually work independently, I think the supply chain resilience concern will become more severe to all the countries. So this actually needs this supply chain resilience concern needs the collaboration between China and the U.S., the both sides, to actually better promote the global supply chain network. So overall, I think we should actually foster a beneficial environment, the ecosystem, so that not only the China and the U.S. but also the other countries can leverage the strengths of the ecosystem to cultivate better science and technology development and as well as innovation.
On that note, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.